it was known for a very long time that physical object there is in physical object a tension between the various dimensions, especially between the surface and the volume. The picture of this pyramid, it's one of the earliest that were built, reflect that. This is the only color picture that you will see, so better look at it. It was began with a very acute angle, but if it had continued on this acute angle, it would have been very high. And the surface that supports the pyramid would have crumbled. And the ancient Egyptians realized this and continued the pyramid with an obtuse angle. And this reflects a learning process that actually is available, is discussed in hieroglyph in the literature. But the person who described this tension first at length is Galilei, and he has a book that was published in Leiden where Johannes works. Where are you, Johannes? There. With bones of large animals, that have different shapes than the bone of small animals, and he did all kinds of experiments. Actually, I hope he did not do an experiment throwing horses from towers. They would splat, and a mouse would not, and a grasshopper would just love it, because of the relationship between the surface area, which offers, in this case, resistance to the air, and the volume. So, we, in this book, contrary to the gasping fish book, it's very nerdic. Johannes and I, because I'm talking now about the book, we have presented a case that is embedded in the history of science and the philosophy of science. He has contributed this because we will not hit people with details right away, but we have to provide a context. And this context is, again, this tension between the surface and volume. And that is the six-platonic solid that have certain properties, but the important thing is that the surface area of this solid cannot keep up with the volume. And you see that they bend, whatever the dimension, whatever the units, the scale of volume and area, at some point one catches with the other. And this is also true for the gill area of fish. At some point, the gill area cannot keep up with the volume. And you see, this is the black and white picture that we have throughout our book. That is one well-known car from India. You see the gill area per volume or per unit weight is much smaller when you get bigger. That means that they can still live, they can still do fine, but they cannot grow at some point. They don't have the surplus oxygen that allows them to grow. They can continue to live, but not to grow. Okay, and you can see that in this example of work that was done by the Japanese scientists that went into the detail, the gill area of larvae grows very fast in actually an empty skull, because the gills are formed later after they have hatched, and the gill go very fast with the power, with an exponent much bigger than 1, and then it gets slower, and finally when they are adult, late juvenile and adult, it grows at about approximately 0.8. And that is very typical. And the result of it is that the gill area per unit weight declines as they get bigger. And this then determines very much how far they can grow. Because at some point, the surface area of the relative surface area of the gill is so small that they get just enough to live, just to do their thing, to go after food and stuff, but not to continue growing. And anything that influences this, what I call maintenance metabolism, for example, high temperature, which elevates the metabolic rate, will contribute to them being smaller. At this point, I could quit and I could go have a beer, but you have, lots of people have problems with what I have just explained, and so one has to elaborate some more. The basic equation of growth in water-breathing animal was a long time in emerging, and there are people like Lavoisier, the Lavoisier couple, because there was a wife and a husband. Spencer, the famous Spencer, of the fittest, and from the Tanafi, they all contributed to this evolution of this growth rate definition. And basically, the version that I prefer is written here. You have H as a rate of anabolism, that is the synthesis of body substance, and K is the rate of what? It has lots of names, and lots of people have misunderstood it, because very often the rate anabolism is clearly dependent on oxygen, and because you need oxygen to fuel the synthesis of body substance. You need ATP, which is formed with oxygen. But this K is widely misunderstood, because there are some people who say this is the burning of body substance, the destruction, complete destruction of body substance. But you also need oxygen for that. So you would need oxygen for both, and that it wouldn't explain anything. So you need the second negative term to remove body structure, body substance, without oxygen. And this problem was not resolved until it was proposed by me, actually, that it has to be the denaturation of protein. And denaturation of protein, most protein, well, all protein, have a certain shape. The shape is not the primary sequence of amino acid, nor the coiling, but the coils themselves coil, and they form a structure that is known as quaternary structure. And the folding problem that you hear about so much in the literature, the folding problem is how these coils form or shape themselves into a globular protein. Now, this protein, when they have the proper shape, when they have folded themselves into the proper shape, they can act as lock and key, as enzyme, and they can perform. But they are in a liquid, in an aqueous solution in the cell. And in the cell, you have Brownian motion. In the molecules, the water molecules move. That movement is known as heat, temperature. And these shocks from Brownian motion are enough to break open this quaternary structure. And they turn into Brownian coil, which cannot be used by the body, and have to be destroyed, have to be eaten up. But the destruction, the denaturation occurs without input of oxygen, and it's extremely sensitive to temperature. So that denaturation generates a half-life for each protein, they last several hours, native protein, or several weeks. And the half-life is temperature dependent. So without oxygen being consumed, substances are being removed from our body all the time. The textbooks, however, they say to denature you have to shake or add acid or change the pH and stuff. But it's not really true. Also, when conditions are ideal in a cell, that the temperature is not changing, a certain percentage of the protein decays, denature spontaneously. And that is the reason why we need to eat and we need to renew our body all the time. So that is the key to understanding this equation. And Putter in 1920 published, based on the equation that we saw, what is known now as a temperature rule. The next picture actually covers the temperature there. It should be 10 degrees and 20 and 15 degrees. Basically, the bigger fish, in low temperature, you grow more slowly to a bigger size. And this was derived from theoretical consideration by Putter in the 20s, 120. And this has been confirmed empirically thousands of times. For example, in a nice paper that Donna and Thanasis wrote for the special edition, they showed for sardines that the sardines in the North Sea grow bigger than the sardines in the Med. And this would have been attributed before to the different temperature, so would be have been attributed to difference in the plankton available. But now we know that it is simply the temperature. Yep. That is things that you can do to amuse yourself. This is theropods, tiny mollusks that are pelagic. This is a seasonal curve, but the ones that are born in spring that experience a summer, they stay smaller than the one that is born in the winter, and that grow more slowly at the beginning, and they get bigger. That is nematode. A bunch of nematode that have no gills, but they don't know that, and they conform to the gill oxygen limitation theory. The surface area in the original publication was used as a measure of their size. And so on the left side, this is a square of the surface area, which is equivalent to length. And on the left side, there is the 3/2 of the surface area, which is equivalent to weight. So the nematode do it. They show that very nice. And the key point is that you saw before. Basically, one can explain what happens to fish and other animals simply by schematically showing that the scope for growth is the oxygen you have in addition to maintaining your basic oxygen requirement. And basically, as you get bigger and bigger, the scope for growth is reduced to nothing, and then you go out at your maximum size. You can continue to live, but not continue to grow. The A is a schematic. The B is actually a real slope, and it was used to explain Eileen, is she here? No. Invasive species that is wrecking the fisheries of the ASEAN, of the Aegean. This Scleratus, well-named Logocephalus scleratus, it's much bigger in the Med than in the Red Sea where it comes from. because the temperature is a bit lower, so they can get much bigger. That's one example of this. And the next question is what happens is with spawning. If the fish have a higher metabolic rate when they spawn, because it's the higher temperature, and they spawn at a certain fraction of the well, okay, so they get smaller. Yeah. And now here it is. If they spawn at a certain size, let's call it WM for maturity, and that corresponds to a certain metabolic rate. And then if you increase the metabolic rate altogether, they have to spawn at a smaller size, because if they spawn at the same size as before, they would spawn much too late. So the QM2, the metabolic rate at higher temperature, the question is it the same fraction between Q maintenance and QM as QM1 and maintenance 1? So, meaning to say, when the fish gets smaller than L max, is the ratio between the two, L max and the size of first maturity, is it the same or between the two? And that was the hypothesis. In '84, I did a paper that was completely ignored, that showed this ratio to be 1.35 or 1.36, and across a large number of species. And the paper was never cited, it attracted zero attention, until some colleagues in Idaho, in the backwood in the US, got exactly the same ratio with freshwater salmonid. And it was surprising, and we did, why is it beautiful? That's beautiful, let's try again. And we did it for cichlids, same ratio, with then a big study that was done on Chinese fish, almost the same ratio, and then the fish around Turkey, a big one, and then sturgeons, the same ratio, and then somebody in Sri Lanka did other things, same ratio, and finally 130 species, 200 cases of coral reef fish, and 1.85 again. So basically, you can say that all bony fish, taxonomists, they're all, what is it, Acanthotherium? All bony fish spawn at the same fraction of this maximum size because they monitor the maintenance metabolism. And when the maintenance metabolism is when the metabolic rate gets close to the maintenance metabolism, 1.35 of it, then it's time to spawn. And it solved the problem about why do fish ignore environmental cues for spawning so many years, because many do 20 years, 30 years, they don't spawn. All of a sudden, they perceive these things. There must be something internally that makes them ready to perceive what is outside, external cue. This is not the external cue that triggered spawning, but the perception of this cue. And this is not any old fish that has this. This is all of them. So this, if I present that, it's in all textbooks. You'll find that the claim that spawning is reduced by growth is reduced by spawning, you'll find in all textbooks, but it's always wrong. And so we have, together with a colleague, a student from China that I had, we have reconceptualized growth using a mathematical concept of a cusp catastrophe. Catastrophe is a change, a qualitative change. It's not the world coming to an end. If you, this is the simplest of the catastrophe that you represent as a cusp. You have the spawning season is one axis and the size of the fish in the other axis. And gray is a spawning zone. And you can see that when they are young, they are outside of the zone of spawning, and at some point they touch it. And that is when the fish mature but don't spawn. There is a whole literature about that, and this is simply explained. Basically the stress from low pH, respiratory pH, is there, but it's not enough to bring them over the hump. So they mature, but then they resolve the eggs that they began to produce because it's not enough. And then the next year, the year after, they're over the hump and they spawn. And at the end of when they don't grow anymore, you even have the situation in long-lived fish that they spawn several times in the season because they cannot get out of the loop, and it's called hysteresis. And so these phenomena, they have, all of them have their own literature, their own explanation. These are just those stories, but the goal to explain all of them in one book. Yep. So that is the summary of this, what I just presented to you. And now getting back to the D factor, the variable that explains all of this is really the exponent of the relationship between respiration or gill area and weight. And the exponent is always smaller than 1 in all fish, in the adults of all fish. But it's not so in larvae. In larvae, as I showed you with the carp, it can be 1 and more. But most fish that are studied are commercially exploited fish, and this is 0.8, about 0.75, 7.8. And that's the reason why the von Bertalanffy equation is criticized by physiologists, because physiologists know that the relationship between respiration and weight is not it's not 2/3. But Bertalanffy, who made the von Bertalanffy growth equation, he found 2/3 in the fish that he studied. He studied guppies, and so basically it says the lesson in this is that if you try to produce, if you try to generalize, you have to work on more than one species. You have to try to capture the range of sizes or the range of attributes of traits. And in fact, you have to generalize the von Bertalanffy equation so that it can accommodate 0.6, not 2/3, but 0.6, all the way to 9, 0.9 or more, but never 1. And so the gold is crucially dependent on D in adults being smaller than 1. Okay? D, by the way, is, I'm not ashamed to say, is named after a certain Daniel Pauly. Yeah. So people, there are some people who don't like the gold. They hate it actually with a passion that leads them to all kinds of things. For example, we have colleagues in A that made a student do a master where she got, for 19 fish, 19 sharks, a slope of 8.87, which is 0.877, which is exactly what you would expect. It's a large fish, and it should exactly what you would expect from the previous graph. But they need to show that the goat is wrong. So what do you do there? You start. You know this character that have like an angel here and a devil here, and they speak, and they say, let's use a segmented regression. And the segmented regression is applied then to the first four points, 3 points actually, and you get 0.5, 0.6 for the juvenile, and you get 1.01 for the adults. And then you write a paper, the goat is all wrong. And this is really shocking behavior, because this is disgusting at several levels. To me, as a person who has student, the most disgusting part is that a student was used for that. And she is the first author of a paper where the others know that they have cheated, and she doesn't. And this is the most disgusting part. And I have written to NOAA, the American Fisheries Organization, and complained. And the person, they took it very seriously, and the person who was responsible for examining this, she said, essentially she agreed with me, but she said that the advice she got, it is a scientific dispute, so they cannot intervene. But it is, we will include it in our book as in a chapter where we deal with various objections that are not justified, as an example of ethical failure. This is very, very bad when you publish something like that. So another point is that if you have d equal 0.6 and you have d equal 0.9, this like the rich getting richer, the big ones, mathematically it is so that it's much easier to grow bigger when you're already big than when you're small. And you can derive this, you can show this graph. I will not explain it, but for Nile perch, it needs to reduce its metabolic rate only a little bit to get double as big. A Nile perch is an immense, huge fish. Sinara pond is a tiny fish. In the Philippines, it is 2 centimeters. It has to pay an enormous price to become bigger, and they don't become bigger. Like if we want to be 3 millimeters, they have to reduce the metabolic rate a lot, and so they don't. So this is like the rich getting richer and the poor being stuck. This is in connection with a paper that we did where we differentiate two type of bigness. One bigness, those of you who are Greek and know from the Orthodox teaching that the Bible in Samuel, there is Goliath, right? And then there is David, and it's much smaller. The Goliath is the only one of the Philistines that was tall, right? The only one. That's one way of being a giant. And Swift, the Gulliver's Travel, after Gulliver was among the Lilliputian, he was among the giants. The name is very hard to pronounce. Anyway, they're all big, and so you can differentiate two type of bigness, whether you're the only one, and when everybody is big, and it so happens that in this paper that we did with Johannes also, we differentiate between the two type of Goliath and whatever, and the gold can also explain why you become a Goliath, and why you become another type of giant. Now, the important thing is what what is the practical application of the goal? Well, you can actually explain why they distribute themselves, why fish distribute themselves as they do. For example, big fish will tend to be in deeper water. Everybody knows that. But actually, the reason is that the reduction in size that is made possible by the lower temperature compensate for the decline in oxygen. So you find big fish always in deeper water. And there is a fellow called Kutan that worked on bass, on striped bass in the US. And he worked on this in the 80s, and it was also too early. People didn't understand what he meant, but basically, if you have global warming, the anoxic zone spreads, and the warm surface water where you can be as a big bass becomes where you cannot be, becomes bigger, and you're squeezed in a small layer. And this is what is happening with big pelagics also, that globally they are squeezed in one layer of water that becoming thinner and thinner. And the tuna are now much in shallow water because they cannot get into deeper water. This explains also, the goal basically explains the extreme sensitivity to temperature and why they go into deeper water during the summer and it move back in the winter. And also why they migrate along the coast of West Africa, in this case North America, and so on. So basically the understanding is that that fish migrate to feed at different places and reproduce at different places. And I think this is wrong. Fish migrate because they are forced to migrate to be in certain water body. And if along the migration route they can reproduce and they can feed, you will have a high biomass, and if not, then you will have a low biomass. Because when we project that they do this migration for biological reason, I think that we ignore the fact that they cannot live in certain water bodies at certain times. And we shouldn't do that because the fish cannot negotiate where they can live. They have to live in certain places, and if these places happen to be also have food, lots of food, then they can actually balance, high balance. And basically, fish when they spawn, the food conversion efficiency immediately increases, like these teeth, because the food conversion efficiency is a function of size. So they have a high conversion efficiency, like they becoming younger. That is the same fish 51 days later. And they can eat like crazy, and they will grow like crazy, and this compensates for this period of no growth during the maturing of the eggs. And that's the reason why the growth curve doesn't reflect the change in spawning. From 1 year to the next, it appears that the fish have not spawned, but actually they have, and they have done so, and they have then compensated for the non-growth by extremely rapid growth. So basically, fish experience lower and lower oxygen tension inside the body. And some people argue that it is the oxygen to the cell that determines metabolic rate, and so on. But it is not. It's the outside door determines, that is the guilt, determines how much oxygen gets in there. And the fact that the smaller dog or the cell have a higher surface area per volume doesn't help, because how much oxygen they get is determined by the outside door. It's determined by the gill. Basically, that's what it is. And I'm almost at the end. Basically, then, if it turns out that all fish have, or animals have, that breathe in water have this, their growth is limited, is oxygen limited, and then it will be asymptotic. And if it is asymptotic, then you can assume that it is, and basically you can impose this on fossil data, lake frequency data, and you get the growth curve that makes people very happy, because these people had inferred that this radiodont grew very fast, but they could not really prove it, and then I did a growth curve that made them very happy. So, that's my last slide. Except for the bent pyramid in Egypt there, all the figures presented here originate from a book that Johannes Müller and myself have compiled. It's called Breathing Water in a Warming World, Principle and Application of the Gill Oxygen Limitation Theory, and it will be available available free of charge for the online version next year, but we are going to work more on this. Thank you very much.